Howdy, friends. Laura Copley here, editor of The Banner. I am so happy that you have joined our magazine's podcast. The pilot season revolves around the decisions, people, and impact of Synod 2026. Just like our Banner commentary column, the views you hear may not necessarily reflect the views of the Banner or the CRC Church, and that's okay. Our goal is to explore. A big thanks to Pastor Derek and Sarah. They recorded all episodes in the hours directly following Synod, catching folks just before they headed home. These conversations are fresh, candid, and really interesting. But enough for me. Let's get to it.
I have belonged to the Christian Reformed Church for 46 years, but I think I have heard the term church discipline more in the last 3 years than in the previous 43 combined. That was the issue on everyone's mind after the discussion on the definition of unchastity, because, as every toddler knows, if there is no discipline, there is really no rule. So would there be discipline in the CRC over this issue? Well, you already know the answer to that, yes. But the CRC was a little bit creaky on church discipline issues, especially on a larger scale like that.
2 years ago, Synod created a task force to think about not just disciplining office bearers, but also minor assemblies by major assemblies, church councils by the classis or a classis by synod. This is really interesting because the congregation, the Christian Reformed Church is largely congregationalist, and it recognizes that all authority is original to the council, which means that most of the governing authority is just held by the local church. The committee has had to ask, does one church or one body of churches have any kind of authority over another? Let's talk about that. I'm Derek Buikema, pastor of Orland Christian Reformed Church, and I'm here with Sarah Zylstra, a writer for the Gospel Coalition, who is an active member of New City Church, a Christian Reformed congregation in Kansas City.
And we are the hosts of the Banner podcast. This is our first season, and in it, we're analyzing Synod 2026, which is our annual gathering of church delegates. And we are here today with Ken Benjamins, who chaired the task force on how we can develop church order procedures to discipline office bearers. And also in his day job, he is a pastor in Ontario. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. So my first question for you is, underneath the question of church discipline is the question of authority, right? Who has the right or even the responsibility to discipline another? I can discipline my own kids. Can I discipline yours? Kind of that question. So, but in a church context. So before this synod, could the synod not discipline a congregation?
Well, that's part of the tension that we were dealing with as a committee, as a task force, is that we have been inconsistent. Sometimes we've kind of said, no, broader assemblies cannot hold minor assemblies to account. But then there are other times where things got so messy that, broader assemblies did get involved because something had to be done. So we were kind of inconsistent about these matters. So we just, we had a task force to just look into, see if we could resolve or help explain or get through this tension that we've had in our history.
Can I just weigh in? Because I was talking to a church historian about this, and he said this has been a tension within the Dutch Reformed churches since the creation of the Dutch Reformed churches. He said the first church order article that we ever had was, no church may lord it over another church. That was our first church order article ever. And he's like, but the first thing our first synod did was tell all the churches that they couldn't be Arminian, that they had to. And so he's like, so from the very beginning of like the church order out of the Synod of Dort, there's been this controversy between local authority of the council and the fact that we are somehow accountable to each other in a broader sort of way. And when a broader assembly speaks, it has the authority to speak in ways that the minor assembly or the church needs to follow.
Yep.
So I'm guessing that tension was present in how you guys talked about discipline.
Very much so. And I have a personal interest in this as well. I did wrote a THM, Masters of Theology, and my thesis was on 1924 and Herman Hoeksema and what happened with him. And there's been, disagreement about what Synod in 1924 did with Herman Hoeksema.
What did they do with Herman Hoeksema? Who is that guy?
Herman Hoeksema, he was a guy who denied the doctrine of common grace. And the Christian Reformed Church said, yes, there is common grace. And Hoeksema said, well, I don't think so, and I'm not going to teach it. So that got him into trouble. And at the end of the day, we deposed him in 1924. So
was he a pastor?
He was a pastor
of Eastern Avenue.
Eastern Avenue Christian Reformed Church.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And then you add onto that, in Canada anyways, we have a lot of Canadian Reformed churches, and they also, Klaas Schilder is kind of the patriarch, the father of the Canadian Reformed churches in the Netherlands, and Klaas Schilder and Herman Hoeksema were good buddies for a while.
Yeah.
And the churches in the Netherlands also disciplined Klaas Schilder. So there's always been, did Synod have a right to do that? So there's always been this tension, maybe yes, maybe no. And so this is only the beginning of our struggles that we've had with this issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, it's untenable, really, to say no church may ever, or no. I guess I can see, you probably couldn't go to another CRC church in Chicago and be like, hey, outside of the council or the authority of your classes. On the other hand, you really can't have a gathering of churches if there's no kind of authority there.
That's right. So we talked about how, authority is original in the local council. So Christ rules directly into the local church, but local churches have a responsibility, a right to delegate a certain amount of authority to a broader assembly. And then by delegating that, you're saying in a covenantal way that you're allowing the broader assemblies to have some kind of authority over the minor assembly, especially if you're breaking covenant. So and then the classes can also delegate a certain authority to Synod as well. So it starts at the local church and it's delegated to the broader assemblies, and we are keeping covenant together. And those who break covenant have to be held accountable in one way, shape, or form, or else we're going to have chaos in the church.
So is it sort of the determination of the committee that these realities of local authority but shared covenant fit together?
Yes.
Which is what leads to the fact that a broader assembly necessarily needs to step in because of the rupture of covenant.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a covenantal principle of church government, really.
Yes. Which, earlier in our report, we kind of talk about how in evangelicalism, you have, or in the Christian church, you have the Catholic Church, which is kind of hierarchical. Mm-hmm. And then you have the opposite extreme, which is congregational, like there is no authority except the local church. But we've said that, there's nothing in the Bible that says that local churches can't covenant together to do something together. So that's kind of the principle our understanding of the principle behind Dort polity is that we can covenant together to hold each other all accountable.
Yeah, makes sense.
You wrote in the report that there's been a shift in how people think about discipline, that instead of a duty and an obligation and something that is exercised towards repentance, the church and the councils are sort of, let me read the quote, it is increasingly distasteful and applied only in exceptionally egregious situations. So rather than being a part of the church's loving concern for its members and part of the task of shepherding, discipline is increasingly viewed as just punishing, as judgmental. That's a problem for sure. But what's the biblical way for us to think about discipline?
The church order, I can't remember which church order article it is, and talk what's the purpose of discipline. It's for God's glory, ultimately. It's for holiness in the church, and holiness, God's glory, and what's the third one? It's going to escape me now. I bring repentance, drawing a sinner back to Christ. So these are important things of what being a Christian is. But I think over the years, there's this idea that holding someone accountable is legalistic, it's negative, and the gospel is positive, and we're nice. But in the end of the day, just being nice without any kind of accountability, it doesn't work. We don't do that in business. We don't do that in the home. We can't do it in church either. In grace, God's law still is operative. We have to operate by rules and procedures. That's just common sense, really. Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Synod recommended your report to all of churches as a useful tool, like here, follow these steps or these principles when you're working through your situations. Would you mind walking us through a hypothetical situation of church discipline that could follow your recommended steps? So if I'm somebody listening thinking, yeah, I can think of a situation in my church or in my friend's church, what would you walk us through what should happen?
Well, part of the thing is that there's so many different scenarios that are involved. So if you have a local council that altogether they are, nope, we're not going to abide by the confessions, the creeds and confessions of the Christian Reformed Church, then another church within that classis can try to hold that person to that council to account. But it could also be, what do you do if you have a situation where the majority of the council wants to break covenant, but the minority does not? Mm-hmm. Or do you have the other way around? The minority wants to break covenant, but the majority do not. So there's all these different kind of scenarios, but we kind of do explain or give some kind of guidance for each one of those kind of scenarios. So if in a local church, if a minority, if there's one office bearer who just does not want to keep covenant with the denomination, then that council can hold that person to account. If the majority of a council wants to break covenant, then another church or even the minority can bring it to classis and ask for classis help. And then that can be that can go up to Synod too if it has to. Yeah, we all kind of work together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think we have a lot of this? Because I'm thinking back over just the years of never hearing church discipline. I'm sure that's not because that wasn't necessary. I'm just wondering, how often would you expect a classis to have to step into a church situation?
That is a very good question. I was, when the task force was first made, I think we were all thinking there's going to be all kinds of situations like this. But we've had a number of disaffiliations, kind of like maybe some of these churches we're seeing the writing on the wall that we will be held to account. So it could be that our report doesn't need to be used at all.
Everybody's self-selecting. Yeah.
And so in that regard, I think the best thing we can say about this report is that we are telling the churches and we're telling the world we have to hold each other accountable. That's really the issue. I've heard some people say, the Christian Reformed Church, now that we have this task force, we're going to start kicking all kinds of people out of the church, and that's what you really want to do. No. I'm not like that. There's nobody on my committee that's like that. I don't know anybody at Synod that wants to be that way. No. I think we all want to do the task of, that this past Synod, we all approved, this planting churches and all this wonderful stuff. That's what we need to talk about. Yeah. In that regard, I hope we don't have to use this task force report very much. Yeah, I hope it goes away.
That makes sense.
Your task force report led to a few changes to the church order.
Yeah.
That will need to be ratified, then I'm guessing by a subsequent synod, because any change to the church order needs to be ratified by a subsequent synod. Changes in just a few words, but what do those changes signify? What happened?
What happened is that the church order kind of an argument can be made that the church order allows for broader assemblies to hold minor assemblies to account, but it's not explicitly stated, and so we're basically explicitly stating it. That's what we're doing. Yeah, and we changed two or added a supplement to one of the church order articles, and we just added another piece to another church order article. That's really what we did. And we could have debated how much more articles should be changed. We kind of thought, you know what, less is better. And so in that regard, we also said that in order to interpret those two church order article changes, you have to apply those church article changes in the light of the whole report that we have just made. This is the lens in which to interpret the church order. Which is interesting. All denominations struggle with this to some degree. So part of my fun job, I guess, in my committee work is I get to speak with different denominations. So I was able to talk to some good people at the Protestant Reformed Seminary and the Canadian Reformed Seminary and Mid-America Reformed Seminary. And we're all struggling with this tension that's in the Church Order of Dort. And I'm kind of curious to see what our good brothers and sisters in the Canadian Reformed, Protestant Reformed, and the United Reformed have to think about our report. I think we all agree that we have to hold each other accountable somehow. So somehow we need mechanisms for that. Are we too hierarchical? I'm wondering if the Protestant Reformed will accuse us of that. I'd like to think we're not, but we'll wait and see. Yeah.
I think that even hierarchical denominations have an issue with this. I think that I was talking to a bunch of Roman Catholic brothers, some Dominican monks in Washington, D.C., and they were talking about how the church never disciplines anyone. And they're like, there are clear instances where people are publicly defying the church in really egregious ways. It's like, why don't these people ever come under discipline? But they were making fun of the United Reformed Church because there was a Roman Catholic that had just come from the URC. And when he became Catholic, he got an email that he was excommunicated. And the bishops all said, excommunication by email. Another Protestant innovation.
Oh, wow.
And so, no denomination is going to do this. No denomination is going to do this perfectly.
Right. No denomination is going to do this perfectly. But you have to do something, or you have to address this issue. So, I don't know if you're familiar with the Christelijk Gereformeerde Kerken in the Netherlands. There's a denomination that also has struggled with this issue, and there is somehow an inability to hold others to account. So this is a denomination that's literally split in half, and they're not even able to hold a synod. Mm-hmm. And it was the Dutch government, I understand, who kind of ordered the churches to hold a synod to fix this mess, because there's civil and tax issues and everything all involved in this. So the church has to function. So, I think that case kind of proved to us that, yep, we need to have mechanisms in place to deal with this. Yeah.
So this is partially just a human problem, right? This is just our original sin problem. But I'm wondering, too, if it's an American cultural problem, because we're so individual, right? Yep. And we're so don't judge me or my truth, you truth. This is just in the water everywhere where we are. Yeah. Is there something, not to look back with nostalgic lenses, but is there a model somewhere of like that you guys were looking at of like this is a good healthy relationship here, or are we still trying to find?
Maybe we're still trying to find, but I think the big word in the Christian Reformed Church or in our Reformed heritage is the doctrine of covenant. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have to think covenantally. And that goes, there's been a lot of talk at our synod this past year, or a lot of overtures that came into synod saying we need to hold, our agencies to account. Mm-hmm. But there was a point at synod where I said we at the local level also need to hold each other to account.
Yeah.
And so even when it comes to paying ministry shares and stuff like that, in order for a denomination to function, we all have to work together as a covenantal community. That's how it has to work. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because that makes me think probably another thing that is lacking a lot is holding each other account, general church discipline inside a church itself, right? Like people who are living together who aren't married, or somebody who left his wife, or we can think of a million different instances where you think, well, probably there should be some church discipline there. Way outside of your task force scope here, but what are the lines that you guys think about when you think about what rises to the level even of a local church discipline issue?
Well, I would start with that. Anything that's obviously a public scandalous sin, it has to be addressed. Yeah. Start with that.
That's true. I think that one of the things that I sometimes hear about discipline is, well, there are a whole bunch of things that you don't discipline because you don't know about. And it's like, well, you can't discipline like hypocrites. Yep. If somebody is sinning inwardly, it's just not something that people are able to perceive. You can only discipline when it is something that is right. Public and clear.
You can't discipline someone for coveting because I don't know what you're coveting.
Right. And so I think that one of the challenges related to all of that is that sometimes people have said that means the burden falls on young women who get pregnant out of wedlock, because that's the only like provable violation that you could call to account. What do you think about that?
Oh, Well, I think in the past we we did too much of that kind of thing. But maybe in response to that, we haven't done much discipline at all. So in my how many years have I been a pastor? 35 years? I don't even know anymore. But I've never seen an excommunication in my ministry or in the Christian Reformed Church. I'd seen it once, but it was in a United Reformed Church. I just happened to be visiting a United Reformed Church one morning, and they did an excommunication, and I kind of thought, I gotta watch this. And I must say, they did a very, very good job at it. They were very gracious and very pastoral, and it's hard, but they did it. And I thought, boy, if we could apply something like that in our own church, we need more holiness in our churches, more accountability. Yeah,
Amen.
Yeah.
I was leading a preaching workshop in New England with a group of 9 Marks pastors, and for them, 9 Marks churches focus on these 9 marks of the church.
Okay.
They're much more loquacious than we are. We've got 3. They just they
a lot of
multiply
marks.
the marks like crazy. But they really stress discipline, and it's to their credit because there was a lot of talk about discipline cases among the pastors there, and they were stressing holiness. And those churches, the Lord is blessing, and there's growth there. Yep. And sometimes we think, oh, we're going to discipline, and the church is going to get scared, and then the church is going to die.
Yeah.
And I think it's in the story of Ananias and Sapphira. It's as immediately after great fear came over the whole assembly, and God added to their numbers. It's the opposite. God's economy and His logic is so often different than ours, and that it was actually that terror and that fear that arose from that church discipline that the Lord executed in really aggressive and straightforward terms that led to the fear. But then the opposite of what we assume would happen, the church didn't collapse and die. The church grew.
Yep. I agree with that. I think even from the youth advisors that we had at our synod, they all spoke about how youth these days are looking for churches that have integrity. They want to be part of a church that means what it says and also practices what it preaches. So I think it's true. I noticed that in my own church. So again, we're not into good, let's see who we can kick out. That's not the point at all. Although maybe in the past we maybe have been that way.
I'm thinking too, like the more normal church discipline is, just like the more normal discipline is in a house, the less like scary and traumatic or big deal that it is, right? Like if it is just something that you're practicing clearly out of love, clearly out of a desire for holiness and bring them to repentance, and you're doing that over and over again, I just think perhaps the reception of it would be more, would be less shocking and more like, okay, like this needs to be a habit that we practice with each other. Yep. I don't know how you get to that kind of a culture in a church.
Well, part of it, I think, is the preaching, because preaching, we also have to preach covenantally.
Yeah.
And in the covenant, God is a God of who gives His promises, but He also gives His demands. But part of those demands is also the warnings of the covenant, which is even signified in our baptism. Baptism is a picture of washing and of cleansing, of going in and entering Canaan, but it's also a picture of Pharaoh going down into the depths, and it's a picture of the flood, and there's judgment. And the preaching opens and closes the kingdom. So I've always explained to my own catechism students that discipline, church discipline in a local church, is just the preaching of the gospel brought by the elders personally to a person who is breaking covenant. And
I love that.
Yeah, that's really what it is. And that's the first purpose of discipline. And if that person refuses to listen to the elders, well, then finally we have no other choice but to let them go.
Yeah. When discipline, the last question I have for you is this. Paint for us a positive picture. Describe a hypothetical situation that would give to us this sense that, oh man, discipline, which is a key, because preaching opens and closes the doors of heaven. Discipline does the same. It also closes, but it also opens the doors of heaven, according to our confessions. Give us a picture of how that might work.
Yeah.
I have a situation like that in my own ministry. We had a man in one of my congregations who was living in sin, was not part of the church anymore. He was either excommunicated or he was released in one way, shape, or form. But then later on, he started to come back, and so he was. We used the form for return. He returned back to the church, and it was an opportunity. He started to see his way that he was outside the church, and if you're outside the church, you kind of got nothing.
Yeah.
But then he started to come back, and I started to say, and he kind of wondered if he should be part of the church again. I said, yes, you got to recommit, and then we'll stand behind you. We're gonna recognize that, yeah, you were wayward, but now you're back. Well, so he did a reprofession of his faith and affirmed his faith, and well, now, he's doing well still to this day. And that's a long time ago that we did this. Yeah.
Praise God.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Ken, thank you so much for being with us. I just really appreciate the way that you make discipline seem like something we would want, which should be. We should want to be disciplined by the Lord, certainly, but also by those who represent Him to us, right? Those who are facets of God to us in our family, in our church family. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Yeah,
It's an honor for me to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And thank you to you so much for watching the Banner Podcast. We are so grateful that you spent a little bit of time with us. And we hope this made discipline a little bit more clear to you as well. And our desire for you is that the Lord would bless you and keep you.